see that. Okay, right.
Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and let the recording go.
Okay.
And share the streaming link out. Oh, I see you on YouTube. Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and let the recording go. I put the YouTube link in the comments so you guys can nab it and add it where needed.
Okay, got it. Hey, Kenny, how you doing this morning? He's not live yet.
He is muted.
There we go.
Okay,
Now I can.
there we go.
Sure.
Now she's letting me talk.
Yeah, now you have permission.
Must have made you upset earlier. It's okay.
Don't do that. She's important. Don't do that. Okay.
No, I had to make it so that everyone's muted when they enter.
Oh, I know. It's smart. That's the way to do it.
And then everyone can ask if they need to be unmuted, but I think everybody who's going to talk is unmuted.
Who needs to be unmuted, right?
Yeah, it's just Glenn, you and me.
All right. And then can I show screen and all that fun stuff?
Yep, you should have permission for everything.
Amazing.
Okay, so if I want to put the introduction screen up, I can do that.
Do it.
Okay, I want to do it on this one. How do I do this?
It is hard to get stuff done when you're like trying to hang out with your kids all day, man. And then you gotta go grocery shopping when
Stand in line to go grocery shopping, you mean?
Yeah, basically. It's a little crazy.
Okay, so is this showing now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great.
Oh, by the way, how many people are on in total now?
31 here on Zoom, and on the YouTube, 3 people.
Oh.
And how about the Zoom Direct?
31.
32 and 31?
So 31 here on Zoom, and then we have 3 watching on YouTube Live.
Okay, and we don't know.
And has somebody posted on all 3 postings now?
I put it in the SoCal Loopers post, but not the other 2. So I shared the link in the chat right here if you want to go share that out.
I'll go pull it off and go update that. So I'll just minimize you guys for a second.
So do I want to start? Want to give it another minute?
Yeah, I'll give it another minute.
Okay. By the way, in my background, you can see Bon Bon. She's going to listen in today too.
All right. Bigger audience.
She might learn something. Not. Okay, I'm going to start. Is that okay with you guys?
Yep. Anyone who can always catch up.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to SoCal Loopers. This is our first big, broad event, and I guess we're welcoming people in Southern California, in the US, in Canada, places in Europe, and I think we're even broadcasting to Israel. I know we are. So this is quite an event, and the bottom line in this is just purely educational. Some of us learn better by seeing and hearing than reading documents, and it's always helpful just to hear and learn again. So welcome to the meeting on Loop Basics. And so I'll give you the disclaimer up front. You all understand that the loop and the DIY loop is a highly experimental and is not approved for therapy, and you take full responsibility for building and running your own system, and you do so at your own risk. There, we've said it. Today, we're going to be covering loop basics, which are the top screen information and the loop home screen charts. And we'll also touch on Apple Health. We do plan on doing 3 more meetings, and it may be more than that as we start to see the need. So Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Pacific time, we'll talk about configuration settings, including correction range, suspend threshold. You can see this. Then next Sunday at 2 p.m., we'll do more on settings, including the real important stuff, which are basal rates, carb ratios, and insulin sensitivities, also active carbs. And then a week from this Wednesday on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, but don't worry about it, we're not joking, all about Night Scout, what it is, why we do it, what the settings mean, and what reports are useful. And we'll also include some follow-up resources. So I can stop the share. So let's just start with introduction. My name is Joanne Milo. I've had type 1 diabetes for 55 years plus. And I was early on in Night Scout. When you built your own rig, I've been looping on Riley Link for over 3 years. And we started SoCal Loopers about a year ago, just so we could meet locally and help each other understand what this stuff was all about and be supportive. That's me. Glenn, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Glenn Weber, and I've been looping since September of 2019. I've had type 1 diabetes for 44 and a half years. I've been pumping since 97.
And Kenny.
My name is Kenny Fox. I am a father of a type 1, Tessa. She's 6. She was diagnosed last January. And I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking, and I'll explain more about me later.
All right, so the way we're going to do this is, yes, Kenny's going to talk. And he's been on Juicebox podcast, which I posted up on SoCal Loopers. If you haven't heard them, there are 2 of them, and it's called Fox in the House. And really worthwhile learning and listening to. So that's some more background information. So what we're going to do is Kenny's going to go through loop basics on the home screen, and we'll take some questions. Then he'll go on to Apple Health and why we use it and what do we need it for. And then we'll open it up for questions. Hopefully we'll fit that all in about an hour. So Kenny, go. Anyone want to unmute Kenny? Okay, we need to unmute Kenny. Aurelia?
There we
There,
go.
I just unmuted him.
Cool.
Okay.
Sorry, I moved my camera so I can look at the monitor and make it look like I'm looking at you guys. Okie dokie. So let's share this out. Okay, so I threw this together real quick. Oh, it's not presenting on the same screen. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll just go through it all.
Slideshow.
Stop you for 1 second. On SoCal Loopers, I'm not seeing the live feed.
Oh, that would be
We
important.
changed it to a YouTube feed
Only.
only. Yeah, you can't, I think,
can't do
believe you can't do both at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okie dokie.
But I did post where the YouTube feed is.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through some loop basics. This is targeted to people that have been looping or are caring for someone that's looping. So I'll cover that again in a second. But
Kenny, hit slideshow and view slideshow on the top bar.
I
Yeah.
Okay, but if I do that, one
Or
second. I have to figure out which screen it's going to go on.
oh, okay.
I have 3 of them to pick from.
Man,
And it's not doing the one I want. So we'll just go this way
so
for
that
the
was
moment.
your issue. Okay,
I'll
so
move the
this is
ribbon up.
fine.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So who am I? So my name is Kenny Fox. I am an IT person. So that sort of helps people understand, I guess, that I think a little differently than some, I guess. I mostly help people use software at a business, help them do their job a little bit better. So it's always trying to figure out how to apply technology to real life. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm a financial coach, so I could train people, doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm the father of Tessa, who you can see there, with all her gear and her serious Tessa face, her superhero face she puts on a lot. I was on the Juicebox podcast, like Joanne mentioned, and that was fun. Hopefully I'll get to do some more of those. If I'm talking too fast or whatever, just make sure you guys mention it in the chat. And here we go. So assumptions that you are either a looper or caring for someone that is, you're not new, basically. You have enough understanding to sort of get around the app day to day. We're not going to cover a ton of detail on how to enter carbs and all that. Katie DeSimone's done a great job of covering that in other videos and in Loop Docs. We will be using Loop Docs today as some of our understanding for this basic stuff. But I'm going to try not to repeat too much of things that are already in other videos everywhere else. I'll just try to mention where those are. But feel free to ask questions. There will be more sessions later, like Joanne mentioned. We're going to cover basal, what that means, how to see it in Loop and Night Scout, how to basically test your basal in a closed loop situation. You don't just have to open loop for that. How ISF and carbs absorption and all kinds of stuff that goes along with that. Like, how does that affect the prediction? How can you see when those things need to be changed? So we'll do all of that.
And to ask a question, just ask it in the Zoom chat feed. So there's a button down in your Zoom in the bottom that says chat. And then you just type your message in where it says type your message here. And I will transcribe those for Kenny, so he doesn't have to have four monitors up.
Yeah, and actually I need to have I can't remember how to put the chat window up. So yeah, you'll have to stop me. Okay, so yep, that's what we're doing here. So what we're gonna try to do is give you an understanding, kind of refresh if you have read Loop Docs and kind of forgot, and we'll go into more detail about what all the different buttons on the Loop screen are, and kind of high level, like what each of the charts mean, and we'll start to kind of cover what those can teach you by looking at those. Can't remember how to put the chat window up. So yeah, you'll have to stop me. Okay, so why am I hearing myself? That's what we're doing here. So what we're gonna try to do is give you an understanding, kind of refresh if you have read Loop Docs and kind of forgot, and we'll go into more detail about what you guys know. I'm hearing my voice back again. Are you guys hearing that? And kind of high level, like
somebody has the YouTube feed up, it appears, and has the volume up too high. So whoever has the YouTube feed needs to either mute themselves or turn down the YouTube feed. Perfect.
All right. So yeah, mute yourself if you're not talking, I guess. Here we go. So we're gonna go over all that. We'll touch on Apple Health because it's in Loop Docs, but I think a lot of people forget what it's for. So, and how you can use it to your advantage. So we'll cover that. And then I'll mention a couple of resources that exist. And then hopefully next time we meet, it'll be easy to jump right in. So overview of the Loop app. Here is the screen on the right. Here is sort of a screenshot from the Loop Docs, which I'll jump to in a second. And just for fun, I'm showing you kind of dark mode exists. So there we go. Just so you know, you could see white or black on the screen. Let me bring up Loop Docs. Okay, so where we are, sorry, I didn't start at the top. We are under Setup App in Loop Docs. Loop Displays is kind of where we're at now. So if you guys have your Loop app available, I would go ahead and open it up. So here is the breakdown of the screen. So at the top, you have the heads-up display or the HUD, and there's 5 icons across the top. These change between Medtronic and Omnipod. So we'll go over these real quick because Katie's covered these a bunch. But we'll step through them. So, and then you have the different charts, all fun stuff here. So the details, what people forget is what all the, like the little tiny icons mean. And this middle bezel one usually throws people off. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about that. Okay, so the top left, you guys all know is your loop. Like it's actually, if it's working or not working, right? Everyone knows green, yellow, red. But if you forget what all the colors mean, you have a lovely loop status section. I'll make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Sorry, I forgot we have videos, so I don't want to get too big. There we go. So you have gray, just means it's not working. Either loop's trying to get going, like if you just open up the app after a while, or if you had swiped it closed, or the first time you're turning it on, it should be gray. Once it's connected to, it's getting CGM data and like blood sugar information and connecting to your pump, and it like makes a command or a connection to your pump to tell it to do something, then it turns green. Yellow means it hasn't been able to do a thing it's been wanting to do within 5 to 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, it's going to turn red. So yellow means, hey, I tried and I couldn't do it, but it hasn't been that long. So usually if you can catch it here, just make sure everything is close enough to talk or everything's functioning well. You're actually getting CGM data from your transmitter, that kind of stuff. And red just means it's not working. But then there's a whole troubleshooting section where if you tap on the red icon, you'll get different error messages. And those can be useful. Once you get used to reading them yourself, they'll be more useful. Otherwise, you just post them in Looped or Zulip chat or something and ask for help. And then we have our lovely open loop icon, which is the top part missing, meaning the loop is open. It's not a closed loop. Open loop, just as a reminder, is loop won't take any automated actions in this particular situation. And that open loop can be any of those colors, by the way. But open loop just means that you can bolus. There'll be little recommendations that'll pop down from the top. I can try to bring some up here. I think I had a picture of that somewhere. Oh, no, I didn't grab Tessa's picture of that. Okay. And actually what I'll do, so you guys can see the loop there. So yeah, the loop can bolus and take any recommendations by tapping on the little bar that pops up across the top, which we'll cover in a little bit. But pretty much do anything. So remember, it's going to run whatever Basil was running when you decided to go into open loop. It won't automatically start the scheduled Basil. Some people think that, oh, my Basil was turned off by loop, and so if I go into open loop, it'll just magically schedule Basil. That's not what's going to happen. It's running whatever temp Basil was set last, and then when that finishes, it will turn to the scheduled Basil because it's not able to change it again. So that's important to know. The next useful you guys look at probably a lot is the glucose one. This is your CGM data, typically. Sometimes you're
Glenn, are you hearing anything?
I am not. I think Kenny's sound, I think, has gone away.
Okay.
Kenny, oh, we lost Kenny. We not only lost his sound, we lost Kenny.
Okay, then we lost all his slides as well.
Yeah, we need,
yeah.
Okay, so, he has started back up again.
Hold on, folks.
Kenny has 4 kids, so 3 of them were probably watching Netflix on different streams at the same time.
Well, while we're waiting for Kenny, I just want to kind of go back. I can't scroll up on his display, but he's mentioned Zulip. We'll talk about that probably in week 4. But I just want to make sure you understand when you touch on any of the loop icons, it's not a tap, it's actually a gentle press. So and it's always a good idea to go there and press, because you will get information. If you don't know what the information means, go look on Looped and you can kind of search on that, and if you're really stumped, you can certainly ask the question. And we're pretty friendly on SoCal Loopers if you want to post a question there as well. Are we getting them back yet?
Let me, oh, there, he's,
Okay. At least we're seeing a screen.
you know what, let me send him a text because he may not realize that he's,
Is his mic unmuted?
There we go. I
there
can't
you
unmute
are.
myself. I don't have permission, so you guys have to unmute me if that happens.
Oh, when you're called back in, okay, I see.
Why
what
I'm
it is.
hanging
Yeah,
out.
when you called back in, you're, you came back muted, okay.
Yeah. All right. Sorry,
By the
guys.
way,
All
if
right.
you have a problem, if we have a problem again, just text me and I'll fix it.
Yeah. All right. So just see a little fun thing you guys can know about the glucose section. If you tap on press on the number, it should pop you right over to the Dexcom app. I use that all the time, so that's a little fun tip. And you can hit, if you have one of the fancier iPhones with no home button, you can swipe across the bottom, but otherwise you can tap the top left and go back to loop. So you can do either one. You can just go back and forth. I do this a lot, you know, if you need to get into calibrate or just see what error is coming through, if anything, on the Dexcom screen. So that's fun because you usually have that open.
Kenny, can you refresh your screen? We don't see anything.
You're not seeing anything on, you don't see the phone?
No, we saw it for a little bit and it went away.
Oh, resume share. Sorry.
There you go.
All right. That's still.
And talk about what you were saying again in the swipe.
Yeah.
You weren't on.
Well, it's
okay.
it's the back action. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay.
You should be able to do that. There we go. It's catching up with me here. So if you tap on the glucose number, it will send you to the Dexcom app, and you can kind of go back and forth from there. And the top left will take you back. And there you go. So that's a fun tip I use all the time. The other nice thing is to look at the number, the time entered underneath the glucose value. This is really useful. This is the last time you got either a blood sugar value or most commonly a Dexcom value. And just remember, I don't know, just the geek in me, not everybody notices this, but it reads every 5 minutes. So you should be able to know when the next one's going to come. It should come at 2:22 if this phone can reach my daughter downstairs. We'll see. That should work just fine. So you can know when the last value was, if it was more than 5 minutes ago, or you're coming up on your next minute. If you're chasing children around like me, and I realize she left her phone somewhere where she's not, and I notice it's going to be about the 5th minute. It's either going to be on a number ending in a 7 or a number ending in a 2. It will be those readings, right, every 5 minutes. So I sort of memorize the 7 and the 2. That's when she's getting readings on this transmitter she's got. And so I'll run over there and give it to her. Or if your little one is, or yourself, if you're swimming or somewhere where you're out of range of your, in a bath, whatever, and you want to get a updated value, you can just wait till the last possible second by looking at the time on here and knowing what times you end up getting, what 5-minute cycles you end up getting readings. That's not part of Loop. That's just Dexcom management, but there you go. Basal, this is the one in the middle here, the orange one. Right now it's at plus 0.0 units. You can also sometimes see a minus 0.0 units. When it's at this particular situation here, this means it's running the scheduled basal. So I think what throws people off is looking at this is why is it up and why is it down, and why does the number that shows there not match what I expect to see, or not match the basal rate that should be running. People kind of want to see the basal rate that's currently running there on the scheduled basal. You can't actually see that there. What you can see, sorry, my phone, if you tap on one of the pump icons on the top right, you can go into your, hopefully it's broadcasting, it's catching up. It's not catching up. All right, hold on. Yay, the magic of wireless. It's not very consistent. There we go. So you should be able to tap on your pump if you wanted to see that, and then you could see, oh no, they moved it. Oh, there it is. Basal delivery. Oh, come on, catch up with me. Why isn't it doing it? If you scroll down on the pod settings or the pump setting thing near the bottom, you'll see the status section, and it'll say, there it goes, basal delivery is schedule, which means the scheduled basal, or it might say the actual rate that it's running, the temp basal rate it's running. But what you see on here instead is what temp basal rate is it running relative to your scheduled basal, because loop assumes, and we'll cover this more in the next one, loop assumes that it looks like my notes went away. It looks like it's one, like, it assumes basal is free, so it's assuming you told it, you're telling loop the right basal rate, and so it should be able to leave it at 0.0, which is neutral, and you should be perfect. It's only trying to really regulate anything above, or if you need less insulin, to try to take it away. So 0 means we're good. If you put the wrong basal in there, then the whole thing's off. And so that's why we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about basal at some point. So that'll be fun. Let me flip over to
Kenny, why is it sometimes plus and sometimes minus?
I think it's kind of just a bug in the code. Like if the last basal rate it ran was a minus, like it's taking away insulin, then when it comes back to a neutral kind of basal state, running the scheduled basal, then it will sometimes hold on to that minus and not redraw the thing in front, because it doesn't really matter. So you might see minus 0.0 or plus 0.0.
And while you're near that, Kenny, we have a question on why is there sometimes a small gray circle next to the blood sugar reading?
Good. Yeah. So here is, you guys seeing my screen? Yes. Okay. So the small gray circle is typically also has a little cloud in it. Sometimes you can't really see it. And that means the last time it tried to get a reading, it was using Dexcom Share. So it was trying to go online to get a reading.
And actually, it also will show small gray circles when Dexcom has a message. And typically the message is you're running iOS 13, which hasn't been approved for Dexcom yet.
Yeah, some kind of message like, hey, come update me or something else. Sometimes you'll see that there when that happens too. But most often it's when it's trying to use the internet to get a CGM reading rather than the Bluetooth connection to the transmitter.
So I put in one paw here,
Yeah.
stretch it over her body and then clip it in. It's not big enough.
Okay.
She's a fat girl.
Mute Gina there.
Listen, I am trying to.
Let's see. So then the other one you might see is that yellow one. That usually just means something's wrong and usually goes away. I honestly don't know all the times it shows up. Sometimes it shows up and it read the last reading correctly. I'm not really sure why it does that, but we'll go with that. All right, any questions on the CGM value? That should be pretty
okay.
simple.
So there are a couple of questions
all
here.
Right, go ahead.
For Mariana, is there a way to see if loop frequently modifies a basal rate, meaning adjustments should be considered in that particular rate? So
like how often it's changing it?
Yes, and which I think you're going to actually cover later. So but let's just defer that one. And then another one, I'm not using Dexcom from Hans, using Spike Libre Meow Meow, and I either get yellow or gray circle all the time next to blood sugar readings. And I'm not sure that any of us will be able to answer that because we're not Spike users, but
no, I haven't read up on it, but I would imagine it's just probably a byproduct of how it's getting the CGM value. So the definitions you see in loop docs are not necessarily relevant to someone using the spike branch. I could try to find out for you. That would be interesting. I may have to build one soon. I have a family member that was just diagnosed and is using a Libre. So when I figure it out, I'll let you know.
And meow meows are pretty hard to get in the US.
Yeah, but they're super awesome. Okay, so when we'll talk about the frequency of changes, that'll be in the charts in the app. And then when we get to Night Scout later, it's much easier to see in Night Scout. So quick tips on, let's see. Oh, no, we'll come back. We got to finish the graphics. Okay, so the next one is the temp basal. We've talked about that. And again, this is relative to your basal. So that means in this picture here that Katie put in loop docs is running a minus 0.8 units. So if her scheduled basal, as in the example listed here, is 1 unit per hour, you could see a minus of up to that amount. So it'd be subtracting up to 1 unit per hour. That means that if that's the case, then basal rate is probably 0, because if you see the number on there that matches your scheduled basal, then it's guaranteed that loop is running a 0 basal rate at the moment. You can see something less. So in the example here, this is a 0.8. Then it's running a basal rate of 0.2 units per hour. So it's not quite turned off, but it's a lot lower than normal, the normal scheduled rate. And same with a plus. If you see a plus, it's going to be more than your scheduled basal rate. So if your scheduled basal is 1 unit per hour, but this is actually like a plus and it goes up. So it's a plus 0.8. That means it's running a 1.8 unit per hour basal, which is 0.8 units per hour more than you would get if you were just doing nothing, running your scheduled basal. So that's important to know, because that's basically what loop can do to, that's when you know it's adding insulin or trying to take it away. I've been trying to work on a word picture for this, and I drew something, but I couldn't get it up here in time. But the idea when you see a drop or a minus in basal, this is trying to reduce your active insulin, which I'll just jump down for a second, is this chart here you see in loop. And active insulin is just how much, I won't say it again, but how much insulin is running in your body above and beyond whatever your basal is, so anything extra. And loop can try to take that away. If it turns off, a lot of you guys know this already, if you turn your pump off or make a basal of 0, then your body still needs insulin, still will use insulin, just doing its thing, just existing, breathing, right? So if you stop giving insulin, if you tell the pump to just stop giving it at all, your body's need for insulin will start consuming or using up the insulin that's in your body that's active. And so loop is tracking how much insulin's left based on what your body functions absorbing. Essentially what you've told loop is your basal. So at this current basal rate, it'll subtract a certain amount at a certain rate. So some people like to say that pumping using something like loop is kind of like driving with no brakes. Like you can let off the gas and you can coast to a stop, and that's kind of what this is. But it's like letting your foot off the gas in gear and drive versus in neutral. So neutral, you're going to roll faster. That's if you had your scheduled basal just running, kind of a dumb pump. Or if you go into your pump or in loop, turn down or off the basal rate. That's like leaving it in drive when you let off the gas. It's a little bit of friction to slow the car down. And start eating up some of the speed, some of the momentum, which is the insulin. So I don't know, I'll work on my picture.
Part of the thing that is a little confusing for all of us who've done pumping for so many years is very often we take a percentage reduction or increase.
Oh, and not the number.
And so, yeah, you're right. The analogy of driving a car and the gas is you don't take a percentage less gas. You take how much miles per hour, and it's a number. So that's the different thing we have to go through on that.
And that's a good illustration there, because you would normally in a car, you pay attention to your miles an hour, not how much percent you let off the gas. Like you might, I guess, if you're really thinking about where your foot is, like 50% less gas, right? If you pull the pedal back halfway, but you're thinking about numbers. And if a lot of you are used to doing percentage drops or changes in temp basal rates when you started, before you started looping, this is giving you more precise numbers. And so it can be a little confusing at first if you don't have your scheduled basal memorized as to what this number should be. And as we'll get to in basal later, I'm finding with more and more people that one basal rate or very few basal rates is kind of what you normally need. So hopefully that will be easier to remember if you only have a couple numbers to remember. But that's a good point, Joanne. Thank you. Reservoir, how much insulin's left? That's always nice. This is the way it looks like for Medtronic users. You get to see more of the units going down than most, and it turns red when it gets real low, which I believe, I don't know if it's 10% of the reservoir volume, so it depends on which pump you're using. If I pop down to Omnipod, it turns red when you get under 20 units, and you get a little warning, little ding, that you're less than 20 units, your reservoir is low. I don't consider that low because my daughter uses 15 units a day, so 20 units isn't that big a deal. But the other funny thing about Omnipod is you can really only see a number once you have less than 50 units. Otherwise, it will just be a gray pod icon and it'll just hang out there. It just means you have more than 50 units. So, and that's not a loop thing. That is a Omnipod thing. That's what Omnipod sends back to the PDM, or same to loop. It's only going to tell you a number back to whatever device it's connected to once it's under 50. So don't go blaming loop if you can't see how many units you have left. You can see how many units you've used, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Then you can kind of figure it out. If you could guess how many units you put in, subtract it if you care that much. There you go. The other icons in the top for Medtronic users, you can have the battery. I think that's self-explanatory. I don't know much about the battery. If anyone has specific questions about what the battery icon means, go ahead and put it in the chat, and then someone like Glenn or somebody that's used one of those pumps can do it. I've only used Omnipod, so there you go. Throw you on the spot there, Glenn. And then for Omnipod, you have the age of the pod. So a pod lasts for 72 hours, basically 3 days. And so usually it's gray and it's broken into thirds. And we just did a new pod on Tessa's, and she's only a day in, less than a day in. I guess I could show the screen, but it just has a circle and it's broken into thirds. When it gets into that last third, you start to see this yellow thing here, or 54 hours old, I guess it changes to yellow and starts to tell you how many hours are actually left, which is cool. But one confusing thing is that, and I'll bring up my slides for that, I mentioned here, is that it shows the time remaining until the pod expires, but that expiration means 72 hours. So that's about the time the pod will start beeping at you every 30 minutes or so and reminding you that the pod has basically expired. The hard stop is at 80 hours. So that number you see in loop is not how many minutes or hours until 80 hours where it's going to shut off no matter what. It's at 72 at 3 days. So you can still go a little further. And if you're not sure how to do that, how to see how much time is left after you are in are passed in that red zone where you've already passed the expiration, you can again jump into the pump settings. Jump in here. Tap on the icons at the top and you can kind of see where it says expires or active time. You have both you can use, whichever your brain likes more. How long has it been active? Again, you're looking for 80 hours max. Or when it expires, again, that's expire at 72 hours. So you can kind of figure out those. Probably active time is a little more useful because you're just looking for 80 hours. Okay, so there we go. That's fun. And just, yeah, I just did it again. I tapped on either the pod age or the pod icon in the top left. Either of those icons will take you to those pump settings, the pump settings page. And I think same thing for Medtronic. It's just a quick jump if you want to get there. It has access to things like test command, which I'm getting buzzed about right now. 65. Oh, Tessa's dropping all of a sudden. You guys are probably noticing that, and I'm not. You have all the other options down here in the middle of the pump settings, especially with an Omnipod. You can play the test beeps. You can do this test command one. This is a really nice one. If you just kind of want to find out, if your phone can talk to the Riley link and the Riley link can talk to the pod. Let's say you were in a red loop situation and you think you got it all cleared up, whatever it is you did, swiping the app closed or turning your Riley off, and you want to see, okay, is everything working? You can run in here and do the test command, and you'll see succeeded like this. but you'll also get a more detailed error message if something's not working. So you come in here and the text that shows up will be a little more detailed than the one you get when you type on the, sorry about that. When you tap on the icon there, or on the loop screen. I wonder if that's really real or not. Yay, compression lows. Okay, so she was riding her bike outside. And you can send it with a little button on the top left there. You can get to replace pod, suspend, all that kind of stuff is there. So yeah, if you, just a quick tip also, if you want to get scheduled basal running quickly, like you wanted to open loop, for example, and you just want to scheduled basal to run, you can do suspend. And once you do suspend and that's done, I can hit resume again. And then you should see now it's running the scheduled basal, even though test is low.
As several have noticed, the Medtronic screen doesn't show nearly as much as the Omnipod screen, but
yeah.
you can also see it in the pump.
Well, you also get, so here's a fun example. This wasn't planned, but I went into open loop so I could try and put her back to a 0 basal rate pretty quick here because she's going low, and I turned that off. So now you get that banner across the top there underneath the HUD, all the icons at the top. And if I tap on that, it'll take the recommendation. And you should, what it's doing is it's kind of going back and forth with the pod, trying to set up the temp basal. And once it's done, you'll see it drops. And her basal rate is 0.2. So that's as off as it can get. And I'll close the loop again.
Penny, do you know if when you suspend the pod, it gives you warnings that it's suspended?
Yeah, if you were to suspend, sorry, get to the pump, suspend. It's actually in loop docs too, but there we go. You can see pump is suspended, and you can tap on the top there to resume it again.
And the Medtronics is very similar as I'm holding up.
Yes, exactly. So now I need to.
It alerts to remind you that you suspended it.
It doesn't alert, it just puts the banner up here.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so now we're back to there. There we go.
You'll actually get a beep if you have beeps on too. And saying Medtronic
Yes,
will
that's true.
automatically
That's
give you
true.
beeps.
And now I'm being told I need to enter 10 grams for chips and cheese because she's hungry, which we all know happens. And I'm just gonna do, I'll do 3 hours, it's fine. Okay. All right, and then tapping on the red loop gives error messages, and basal rate is relative to your scheduled basal or basal override. So we won't get tuned to overrides right now, but an override will change your basal rate, right? So if you do 150%, it will increase your basal by 50%. So Tessa's is 0.2, half of that is 0.1. So 150% basal for her, an override would be a 0.3 basal. So when you see a 0 plus 0 with 150% override on that neutral state, that means it's running a 0.3. Not really the scheduled basal, but like the scheduled basal in terms of what loop knows. That also means that I could start seeing a negative 0.3 when the basal is off rather than a 0.2, even though I didn't change the scheduled basal. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. But just remember the overrides changes your basal rate. So that also means that these numbers up here will change. That's also how you can see on Omnipod some kind of funny numbers where it's like 0.27 or something like that. Even though the pod can only run basal rates in 0.05 increments, it's doing a percentage change. So if I did like 160% basal override, oh yeah, that wasn't real. It's going back up.
Little Dexcom action.
Hey, what diabetes video wouldn't be, live stream wouldn't be complete without something like that. So
let's come back to overrides next time. Let's move on to that.
So there's overrides. Okay, charts. Let's do charts. Let's go back to, I think loop docs is probably the best place to go first, but we'll start since I have the phone up. So the chart we're going to do, the top there is the glucose chart. That's the one that shows the blood sugar values. You can also see that the blue kind of highlighted section in the middle there is demonstrates your correction range, which briefly is where loop is trying to get you to, kind of land you at the end of all of the ups and downs of eating and everything. That's where it's trying to get you to. So it's highlighting the correction range at the time that it's set for. And then you see the dotted line represents the current prediction. So there we go. We'll get into prediction later. And then the very top next to glucose, it says eventually 123 milligrams per deciliter. So that's the like end of the line, end of the prediction line, which goes out to the end of your insulin action time, which for pretty much everyone is 6 hours. So that's how far that goes. Mine's a little bit less. That's why you see 5 hours basically sitting there. If you want to see what is along that prediction line, sorry, my phone was locked. Kind of what it's looking at, you can touch and drag your finger. Everybody grab your Loop app. You can touch and drag your finger across any of the charts on the screen here. See if I can get it to show up. There it goes. And it will show you all the different points along all those graphs kind of lined up as best it can. So it'll even show you out to the prediction, like, oh, what does Loop think you're going to go do? I don't think she's really going to be 22 eating chips right now, but you know, whatever. So that has to do with momentum, which we'll talk about in a second. So you can kind of see the different, either the history or the prediction kind of going forward. And Loop tries to guess. You can see the active carbs and everything else kind of has a little bit of a future guess as to what it's going to be. So that's fun. If you tap on the glucose graph, you end up getting this screen here. This shows you the pieces that Katie had listed in one of those questions on those quizzes she put out. These are the main components of the prediction, like how does Loop figure out what it's doing here? And if you're ever just trying to wrap your head around those pieces, you can always come in here and say, right now, how are these pieces playing? So if you uncheck any of these, if I want to take the carbohydrates out of the picture, so the chips Tessa's about to eat, I can turn that off. And so based on the current insulin on board that she has, her active insulin, if I took away the carbohydrates, this is what would be left if she didn't eat, basically, or had no carbs in her system at all from even earlier. Turn it back on. There we go. If I take away the insulin only, the current insulin on board, then you can see the carbs would take her up. Loop guesses to 177. But you guys are all seeing the same thing I am, where you see those those last two dots are on their way up, but it kind of had a big drop in the middle. This is where momentum comes into play. So it's averaging the last three dots, like kind of mathematically, it's taking a slope between those three. So you have one really big drop and then two other ones kind of going up a little bit. So
yeah, you know what,
average,
Kenny, your screen didn't refresh. So if you would refresh to the, refresh your connection so that the
resume. I don't know why it paused. Okay.
There we are. Okay.
Okay. So momentum is those, again, the slope, the average of the last three dots. So on average, there's one big drop and two small increases. So Loop's going to say, or actually I guess two drops and one increase. Loop's going to say, well, on average, the average of that line is down, which is why you see that big drop. But we all know that food hits harder than that. And that drop there probably wasn't super accurate because it's a brand new sensor that was turned on an hour ago. So, so that's probably not right. So you guys got to know that. But if I take away the momentum, you can kind of see the impact it has in this particular case. It's fairly significant. So it going to come up faster if you take away momentum. And then you have retrospective correction. That's basically like fuzzy fixing my prediction from in the past, what Loop's trying to do. Don't get too into that one. I mean, it's helpful. It helps kind of guide Loop's decisions in the future a little bit. If I turn it off, you can see it makes a small difference. Bigger in this case, but mostly because of the big drop. But yeah, so if you take away carbs, insulin, and momentum, those are the main ones you care about. So that gets super geeky into the details of the prediction, but it's important to know that all those things are in place. And so momentum is the one that I think people can see the best once they realize it's there. Because if you're dropping fast and then you eat, for reasons we'll get to in a future topic, but carbs don't hit as fast as kind of real life in Loop in terms of what it thinks is going to happen. Plus you have momentum kind of adds to that drop. So if you're dropping and then you're eating, Loop kind of assumes you're going to go down pretty fast until it starts to see a couple of dots kind of turning the other direction. So momentum. That's an important one because it's the thing that can make the prediction look the least accurate. It can be accurate, but sometimes when you say, oh, wow, it really thinks I'm going to go super high, well, maybe because you had a big jump, maybe your sensor was jumpy or something, or you just had a little bit of juice, and it's going to fade pretty quickly, but the jump is high. So Loop thinks you're going to continue that trajectory up when you could just, run up the stairs and run up and down the stairs and cut that off pretty quickly. So momentum kind of exaggerates those lines sometimes. Let's see. It's the glucose chart. Okay, so active insulin. So active insulin is the orange one in the second one down. Active insulin is also called insulin on board. You guys are probably more familiar with that term in your pump. So IOB, or active insulin, is what's here. In the case of Tessa right now, it shows that her active insulin is 0.35 units. So that's how much insulin she has left, or Loop thinks she has left, based on basal and based on what it's currently doing right now, which is subtracting insulin by turning off her basal. So you have all the components of insulin, the insulin action time of 6 hours with the insulin model, which we'll look at in a second. We'll show you how fast the insulin decays, what Loop assumes, how much insulin is left in your body, in addition to subtracting it because it's running less than the scheduled basal right now. So it's kind of tracking all that stuff for you, which is pretty awesome. Active insulin is really important. And as we'll get to in our next topic, in terms of talking about basal, it's really the indicator. If your basal is correct, active insulin is really useful for telling you what to expect. If you have a lot of active insulin, then you'll probably start dropping. If your food, finishes sooner than Loop assumes, or if you have no food, if you're, bolusing at night or something. You can also have negative active insulin. I think I have a screenshot somewhere of that. Let me see if I can stop my share here. Or I'll pause it and then find a picture that I think I put in my slide deck of negative active insulin. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that negative number and may be confused what it is, and I'm only going to spend a minute on it. That's not it either. Okay. I'll find the picture over here. So negative active insulin means that you're missing insulin. It's actually said in Loop Docs a couple of times. It's basically like a kinked cannula, or another situation where maybe your pod or your site rips off, where you're not getting insulin. So what should happen if you have negative insulin is your blood sugar should start going up. If your blood sugar isn't going up when you see negative active insulin, then most likely your basal's too high. Like Loop has subtracted too much insulin by turning it, off. Here we go. Okay, I'll just bring this over here. And I will stop share screen 3. Okay, so here's a screenshot I took from Tessa's phone, turned sideways. You can see negative active insulin. And you see that the line kind of goes under the main line. This is again out in the future. It's kind of wrong because this screenshot's taken at like 2 a.m. But you can see that it says negative active insulin, negative 0.11. So her blood sugar number should start going up. And in this case, you can see that the current blood sugar number, sorry, looks like this is taken around 7 a.m. Blood sugar is actually falling and the active insulin is negative. So that's not a good thing. So that means the basal's off or something else is off. Maybe she's running or laying on her sensor, which I think was the case when I took this shot. So doing a compression low. But her blood sugar is falling and the insulin is negative, and that just shows you that there's a bar kind of underneath. So that's what underneath represents, is negative insulin. That can be really useful if Loop wants to get you back up and it's accurate. It'll know how much insulin to fill back in and level you out, which again, we'll talk about more later. Insulin delivery on the bottom. So those of you that have your Loop app open, you notice here I turned it sideways. You can turn your Loop app horizontal, and you can kind of see things a little bit more history. You can see that under the insulin delivery section, you have the bars that go up are temp basal rates that have been run that are above your scheduled basal, and the ones that are under are below. So it's a graph over time of what that icon at the top center of the Loop app is. So they both kind of look the same. So these will help you. So the question earlier of how do I see if Loop's been doing a bunch of different things, that's probably the easiest spot to look, is the insulin delivery section chart, and just kind of see all the ups and downs. And then flat means running scheduled basal. Do I have any more questions, Glenn? Am I too boring? Is this too basic?
Yeah, I'm just curious on the insulin delivery. Do you use that to say, huh, she's always positive, maybe the basal isn't right? Or
Good question. I mean, it seems like Katie does when Kate and Katie are pretty good about looking at that. I'm not real good at looking at those numbers, those bars, and like assuming what that means. So I usually just look at the active insulin history to kind of say, and then blood sugar values that correspond with it to know if basal's right or not. In terms of what its Loop's doing, I guess it does help me know that Loop's doing some work. I'll be honest, generally speaking, I wear a watch and I can bolus her pretty easily if I don't like the way things are going. So I'll usually just do something about it. So you don't usually see quite this many ups and downs. But this was overnight. I was sleeping, so that happens. One more thing to point out on this insulin delivery screen, there's a couple of arrows that are kind of mashed over here around 12:30, 1 o'clock. Those little arrows are indications of when boluses were done. I don't think I have any cool ones. And Tessa's right now aren't that busy. For those of you using like an auto bolus or micro bolus branch, you may see a lot more of those. And you won't really see any increases in basal. You won't see any bars going up because on those branches, there's no increasing temp basal, it's just boluses. So you only see downs and you see arrows. So it does look a little different if you're doing that. And I'll show you real quick what Tessa's phone looks like with those, since I can look back a little bit. Come on, screen mirror, you can do it. Wish everything was wired. Oh well, I may not get to it. Okay, so I'll just come back to my screen if it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay. All right, we'll just go back. Back to screen 3. Okay, so that tells you insulin delivery boluses and temp basal changes. Now let's tap on the insulin delivery chart or the active insulin chart. Either one will take you to some screens that look like this. So you'll see insulin delivery. This will tell you your current insulin on board and your total insulin delivered since about midnight typically. I don't know, Joanne asked a good question last time we were looking at this. Like, why is that there? I don't know, but it's there.
I think I'm gonna put you back on this. We're gonna do that in our next event because this ties into active insulin.
Yes, yes.
I want to be dealing with this now.
So you have reservoir volumes, event history. Event history is what people would like. And in the event history, you can see what was done. That's good. I do have a screenshot for that though, for Omnipod especially, but I think it works for Medtronic. Is when you get into this chart and you look at a particular bolus event, you're going to see the amount and then a certain or uncertain status. Uncertain can be helpful if you see that there's a chance that maybe it didn't get delivered, the bolus didn't get delivered to the pod. I think that happens for Medtronic too, but that's pretty much the only thing I look at in the pump events is to look at, was it certain or uncertain? If it's uncertain, you don't think it was delivered, you could delete it out of the pump history, the event history, and it will delete it here and in Apple Health. And then it'll be as if the insulin was never given, and then you could give the bolus again if you wanted to. But you'd have to be pretty certain that it was uncertain, that it wasn't delivered. So
I'm thinking, Kenny, we've been taking questions as we go along. If you have any questions on what we've covered so far, just put them into chat. We'll throw them out. And if you want, Kenny, you could just go on to Apple Health.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to grab screenshots for Apple Health. Now I need you have to pull up Loop Docs, or I need my share to work. Okay. So Apple Health. Well, we've talked about Apple Health before. It's in there. Hopefully you guys know what it can be used for. It's actually where Loop's database is, where all the information about carbs and insulin given and everything is stored. So If you were to enter things yourself into there, it would affect what Loop thinks is happening. Here's the event history. Okay. I'll go into Apple Health, which is the heart. Okay. So in Apple Health, you have two things that you care about. If you guys would open Apple Health and go to the browse section, if you don't have it already, I would go into your search and I would find two things. You'd find blood glucose and insulin delivery. So both of those. And when you go into each one, so we're going to insulin delivery here, you go down to the bottom and you should see add to favorites. It's already added to mine. You see the star there. You can add to favorite. What that will do now is if I go back to the summary, little heart on the bottom left, you can see that my favorites are up at the top. Blood glucose and insulin delivery. Those are two useful ones. So once you have those there, so you can access them easily, we'll talk about blood glucose first. So blood glucose, if you come in here and you go to, yes.
We just lost you again.
Oh man, all right. There we go. Okay, so you come into here. I think that's every time I move the screen, sorry. So you go into blood glucose, you drop down to the bottom. I really don't like the way this is laid out in the new health, but you can say show all data, the bottom section there. And you guys should see all of your recent CGM values, the Loop's writing to health. So those are Tessa's latest ones you can see there. And if you go back far enough, I think 3 hours or so. Well, there's one. Okay, so you have the little like graph looking icon. I hear that 94 at 11:27. I'm experimenting with something. I have Tessa's Contour Next meter paired to the app on her phone. And eventually it's a little slower than I'd like, but eventually it writes those values that it syncs from the meter to Apple Health. Not fast enough that I'd like it. It takes a couple minutes, unfortunately. So I've manually entered these ones that have hearts next to them. I've put those in myself. And then you go back 3 hours and you start to see the Dexcom logo ones. So Dexcom will write health blood glucose values that are 3 hours old into Apple Health. So it'll overwrite the Loop ones, and Loop does all these other ones. So that's what's in there. If you want to delete one of these, so if I was doing a finger stick, like the heart one there, I could click edit, tap edit and hit the minus, or I could just simply swipe to the right and it'll prompt me to delete it, and I could delete that value. So if you put the wrong number in, good idea to remove it. So this is mostly used if you're going to do a finger stick for any reason. So if you're in a sensor warm up, which is what was happening at these times, Tessa was getting a new sensor this morning. So you could enter values in here, and then Loop will see those values as if they were coming from your Dexcom, and it will make predictions and take action for a good 15 minutes or so, turning off or on basal, bolusing, whatever, and kind of act mostly like normal when that happens. So that's why you would want to put values into here. If you're getting an error or you calibrated and you want to add a couple more dots, I talked about the last 3 dots sort of helping with the momentum. You may want to add a couple of values in here to kind of level out that line, especially if you calibrated. If you did a sensor restart and the values like jumped like 30 or 40 points higher than they should have, you might want to open loop, by the way, when you do that before it comes back online. But you could also delete the latest value if you thought it was messing up loop too much. If it's like way up here and you calibrate and it's way down here, you could go in here and delete it if you wanted to. Be very careful about deleting things, though. This is the information that Loop uses to make all its decisions. It's storing everything here. If you delete things, you have to put it back yourself.
So Kenny, let me get a little more basic on this.
Sure.
What you're saying is we need to use Apple Health.
It's important. Yeah, I would use it.
But we have to use it?
If you decide to just run scheduled basal during a sensor warm-up, then no. But if you want help doing boluses, because Loop won't have any CGM values, so it won't give you a predicted or recommended bolus. You'll just have to do the carb ratio math on your own. So I think practically speaking, it'd probably easier to do a finger stick than to try to figure out everything on your own.
Do you need Apple Health to run Loop?
You do have to, during the setup process, you give Loop access to Apple Health to write data. So you have to have it, and you have to make sure Loop can write to it. Other than that, you don't necessarily have to be in here, no.
So it's a critical part of using Loop is to use
Yes.
Apple Health.
You using health is not critical. Loop using health is critical. Put it
Okay,
that way.
and then all the settings that you give access to, it's all settings.
Yeah, everything that Loop asks for, basically. Yeah, you want to give it.
You just
That's
say
in
yeah.
the
Everything. Okay.
yeah. Insulin delivery. This one's fun. People forget this one a lot. So let's say you give a bolus correction because it was a bad site, or you ran out of insulin. You can go into insulin delivery and you can give yourself a manual. You can like log your manual injection. It's probably the most common use for insulin delivery. So you can come in here and then you can click add data. And it will by default set up as a bolus, and you can enter that bolus if you'd like and change the time. It's a little bit funky with the start and end times. Yeah, if you push the end time back, it changes the start time. But if you go make the end time go forward, it doesn't update the start time. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect how Loop reads the information, but it's a little quirky. Just so you see that there. So you could put in, a half unit bolus. I could do that, and it would affect what Loop sees as active insulin in the system. So you can add that there, especially if you're correcting and you're not sure if you didn't get the insulin, or maybe you're just sick, or maybe you messed up on carbs or something. And so your bolus is not to make up for insulin that wasn't getting in, but you're just not sure. So it's safer to enter it in here. I also use this if Tessa's on a pump break for a day or two. And so we'll come in here and I'll enter them. I might not enter it for the whole first day if she's going to make it a multi-day thing. But definitely in the last, few hours before we start putting the pod on at night, it's usually when we would do that. I would make sure to enter or go back and look at my Night Scout if I've entered them manually there all day instead of in Apple Health. I'd catch up health by adding all the boluses and things. Or if she just doesn't want to wear the pod for the rest of the day, that happens, right? It rips off and she's like, I don't want it. She likes to go back to shots for a couple hours. I'll enter the injections into here so that Loop is caught up on what's happening. As soon as we put the pod back on, it knows how much insulin is running and everything's safe to start again. So this is really helpful for that. Sorry, screen locked again. And then what we'll cover later with getting basal right and stuff. If you see, I'll just mention it quickly. If you see negative active insulin and your blood sugar is continuing to fall, that means that your basal rate is too high, at least sometime in the near past. And so what can happen if you treat that and you go back up, Loop's going to give more insulin to replace what it sees as negative. So if you don't want that to happen, especially at night, you can come into Apple Health, you can do insulin delivery, you can add a bolus that's equal or greater than that negative amount, and that'll tell Loop, hey, no, there's really more insulin here. Don't give me too much more insulin after I treat this low. Let's not take questions on that because we'll cover it more next time, but that's the other reason why you would use insulin delivery. The last thing you use insulin delivery for is if you needed to delete a bolus that was uncertain, like we talked about earlier, and it didn't delete out of here on its own. The Loop still saw the insulin, even though it wasn't really delivered. You could come in here and delete it on your own.
Will that self-correct when it goes from uncertain to certain?
Yeah, so there's some more logic into Loop in the last few months or something, where it does some extra checks to try to verify if a bolus went through after the fact. So it'll initially read as uncertain, and then it'll do some back and forth with a pod. And sometimes it'll say, oh, okay, no, I think it went through, and it'll change the status to certain. Sometimes it'll stay uncertain, and sometimes it will kind of say, oh yeah, it probably didn't go through, and it will actually delete the entry for you. So you might go in and look at this pump event, see an uncertain bolus, and within another 30 seconds to a minute, find out that it's not there. And that's because Loop was able to confirm that in fact the bolus didn't go through, probably because there was another bolus already running or something along those lines. And so then it deletes the entry, so it doesn't count against you in that sense. So you don't have to come in here and do it on your own, but you could if you got stuck. So, all right, any questions on health? Anybody want to ask? This is pretty much one of the last things we'll have time to cover. We'll go a little bit longer into the carb screen, but.
Okay, I think, I'm not seeing many more questions
Okay,
on
cool.
Apple Health. You can come back and ask us on the Facebook group. So what, I think we can just kind of wrap this up unless there are questions coming in as we do this. And just say the next meeting will be Wednesday, March 25th. Kenny, are you good for 8 o'clock?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, we'll be 8 p.m. California time. And we'll be covering configuration settings on Loop, which covers correction range, suspend threshold, delivery limits, insulin models, and temporary overrides. If you have specific questions about that, post it on SoCal Loopers. And I think that's probably about all we need to talk about. I'll put up the next 3 meetings up on SoCal Loopers, just so you see what we need and ask us questions.
Yeah, I'll mention this one, just that we're going to talk about carbs in another topic because it's kind of a big deal. Like there's a lot to cover. So this screen here, you just tap on the green graph and you get to this list of what Loop saw in terms of carbs, but how and why is a bigger topic to get into. So we'll cover that all on its own.
Okay, any more questions? We're just getting some feedback saying, great, amazing, thank you.
Well, hopefully that's the case because I need to do a little more prep, make it prettier, but not as prepared as Katie usually is for her videos.
And should we update to iOS 13.3.1? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Absolutely. There's no problems with that. And again, if you have very specific questions or what you want to see covered in the next meeting, please tell us on SoCal Loopers and we'll incorporate that. Thank you, everybody. Please stay healthy, stay home, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands. Thank you, everybody.